Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Discuss. I'm excited today, as I mentioned in the last podcast episode, we are traveling north of the border and we're going international with our first guest from outside of the United States. We're heading up to Canada. So Michelle Strong is a registered holistic nutrition and the founder of MyMindBodyBaby.com. Being a food nerd and clinical nutritionist for the past 13 years has taught her a lot, but nothing like the struggle with infertility for 2 long years. Since then, Michelle has shifted her focus from helping those on their personal road to motherhood. In 2018, she launched My Mind Body Baby, an online hub that provides research-based programs for all stages of the fertility journey. And we are so excited to have her here. Michelle, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here.
What a pleasure. So I couldn't be more excited to have you on here. I'm so excited to talk about how you got into wanting to be interested in nutrition, and certainly about how you kind of transform that into the perinatal space. And I stalked you on, I'm going to answer my own question. I usually ask everyone how we know each other, but I stalked you on Instagram and was like, hey, can we be friends?
I was A-okay with it.
Thank you. Well, you're very gracious. But yeah, I saw a lot of the stuff the content that you've been sharing, and I thought, this is a human I need to have in my life. So
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you decide that nutrition was kind of where you wanted to focus?
Yeah, well, nutrition, I knew early on. I was traveling after university, and my dad at the time was in the nutraceutical sort of world. And I kept asking him different questions. And he's like, why don't you just go to school for nutrition? And I was like, oh, right. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So, that led me to my, schooling and, starting out my own business. And for a long time, 11 years, I ran a brick and mortar nutrition consulting practice. I would sort of see a whole bunch of different people. And I was always told you need to have a niche where people, how people know you. And yes. I couldn't find something that really spoke to me because I sort of liked everything. And then after struggling with after struggling with my fertility, and, I'm skipping to the end, but after conceiving successfully, finally, I realized that showing women how to change their lifestyle to support the chances of getting pregnant was a huge passion, and it has continued to be, and it has flourished into what it is now, which is a wonderful community of women who are supporting women and talking about research and implementing techniques that have been proven to work and proven to support better, pregnancy outcomes.
Wonderful.
So here I am.
And it's so exciting. And I know you've got you have a pretty big Facebook group and a following on Instagram, people who have that space to collaborate and cry on a shoulder, a virtual shoulder, and share stories. And it's nice to have that space of community where people can feel that support and love and feel nurtured.
Yeah, I think it's hugely lacking in the space. I mean, there is a lot of groups and they're all wonderful, and I'm a part of a lot of them. Mm-hmm. But I also hear from people on a regular basis that they don't know anyone who's going through this, even though it's so common. And I just have a question. Is it okay if I ask you? I'm like, yes, ask, join our group, ask them. Yes. We all want to support and be that person to support somebody else, because we know how it feels ourselves to go through this horrible, circumstance.
Right.
And so I find that our group is very active and really loving to support of each other. And we're actually working on building out a monthly meetup, just to talk to people, not just type to people. Yeah. And so we're looking forward to how that sort of pans out as well.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because, first of all, I just want to go back and validate so hard that you need to find a niche. And everybody says that in any sort of private practice of you can't just talk about nutrition. You have to talk about specific nutrition, and you can't just be a therapist. You have to pick something. And while that's not 100% true 100% of the time, it is interesting that is in our professions it's kind of a thing. So, and that's not a bad thing, obviously specializing in something, but I did, when you said that, I was like, yep, heard that before a lot.
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
and yeah, and I think it's interesting because I'm specialized in this field, and I do see clients who have no interest in anything related to perinatal at all, currently at least. But it's funny how in my mind, I'm like, there are so many resources available. There are so many groups. We talk about it all the time, but it's true. People don't know, because even though we're working to decrease the stigma of fertility issues, or like we don't talk about it, we still don't talk about it. And so people really don't know. They feel like they can't ask questions. You said even specifically, like, can I ask you? Like, of course you can ask, but people feel kind of reserved, and they can't take up that space and don't even know where to start
mhm.
to look. So it's great that we just continue to get the word out there that these communities exist, that these professionals, evidence-based activities and ideas, and so that's really exciting to hear. I'm really glad. I'm glad to hear that that's what's going on over in your world.
Yeah, honestly, like that's a huge part of like what I love to do. I love to teach nutrition and lifestyle for sure, but I love the community piece and like having like I had somebody when I was going through my journey and I do not know what I would do without that person. And so if I can like be that person or connect that person to somebody else who can be that person, I'm
Right.
so happy to do that. That
Yes.
is like a huge passion of mine.
Yeah, it is. And I love that you're saying, but obviously being able to type to each other, I think in a pandemic world, we are all becoming more, we're finding ways to feel connected to people even virtually, whereas before, even in 2019, it still kind of felt very distant. And I think a lot of people are finding a way to feel that connection, even through
Mhm.
typing or through Zoom as we're using right now, that sort of thing. But I love that you're even going to take that next step and be like, we're going to all talk. We're going to see each other's faces. And even though we're not physically in sharing the same space, being able to have that. So that's a really great opportunity too. And I'm excited to be able to pass that information along. Obviously, at the end of this conversation, I'll ask you where everybody can find you, and all of that information will be in the show notes. But um, just that connection, that piece of, you haven't done
Mhm.
anything wrong. Here are other people who are feeling very similar to you, validation, community, social support,
Mhm.
all of that. It's so, because
Massive.
fertility can feel so isolating, fertility issues, especially whenever one around you that you mostly know is, getting pregnant and popping out babies. And you do feel like, what's wrong with me, or what, it's just me alone. And it's so not. And we're just continuing to chip away at that stigma and building awareness one person at a time. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're happy to do it. So
Yeah. So I was talking with you a couple weeks ago when we first officially chatted face to face versus just texting on Instagram. And you said something that blew me away. I wrote it down. I'm literally looking at it from, let's see, it was February 2nd. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm writing this down, because we were talking about how important mindfulness and obviously nutrition can be very helpful for some people, and talking about worry and validation and all of these conversations that I feel like we do have a lot, that's in this space where we want to keep bringing people in. But you used the expression, the infertility hangover, which I'm pretty sure is what I'm going to title this conversation, unless we take a very long tangent somewhere else. And I would love for you to say more about that, because you said it to me and my mind just busted wide open.
I think I guess what I was referring to was, like I spent 2 years going through fertility challenges. Of course, there's people that go through it far longer, shorter, whatever. It doesn't the length doesn't matter.
Right.
And it was literally the most challenging time in my life. I felt like isolated. I felt like the uncertainty weighed on me very heavily. Is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? What then? Um, and I felt like mentally at times I couldn't cope very well with the situation.
Mhm.
And I didn't at the time, until later on, have any good coping tools to get through it. I was a nutritionist, so I was leaning heavily on like nutrition and naturopathic and acupuncture, but I wasn't really exploring some of the other areas that I know and to be a big, to be a big help when it comes to fertility challenges. And then once I had my daughter, I still found myself very triggered by conversation, and still to this day, like she's 3.5 now. And if someone has a triggering story to me, or if I watch a movie about fertility challenges, or even anything to do with like babies, little kids, moms, I get so overwhelmed by those feelings. And it's like, why am I still having these feelings or this reaction or whatever it is when the infertility is over? But since I've had her, I've realized it doesn't just go away once you have a baby. There's no, like, you're not just miraculously cured from having all of these triggering thoughts and worries and the anticipation and the uncertainty. It's still there. It just takes on a new life. And so for me, it's like the hangover effects of that fertility journey are still here. And I'm still dealing with them on a day-to-day basis as they come up. Like, it doesn't impact my life significantly anymore, but it's there. And it's something I wasn't expecting at all to experience. And since I've noticed that about myself, I have heard so many people say the same thing. Like, just because you get your miracle, it doesn't mean those feelings go away. And it's so interesting how the body and the brain works, like just sort of, keeps them sort of packed away a little bit, and then they pop up as needed. Whether it's a defense mechanism, and I'm sure the answer to this better. I'm not, for sure. Like, I think it's probably, just like some deep-seated grief that hasn't been dealt with, or it's your body's way of like protecting you from, where you were in the past, or however that works. But yeah, this infertility hangover is something that is real and alive. And I'm sure a lot of women, maybe now that they hear this word, they might be able to put a name to how they feel postpartum and realize, like, I'm not crazy, and this is real. And there's other people that are going through that same feeling as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a beautiful way of encapsulating that. Absolutely. I have chills from what you were saying, is that it's that grief and, quite frankly, the trauma of infertility, whether or not you experience an actual pregnancy loss, or just never get pregnant, or the myriad of everything that goes, that is the beauty, of infertility, what you go through. And it's interesting that you mentioned too, I'm a big fan of not participating in the trauma Olympics. You said the same thing. You didn't say the trauma Olympics, but same thing of like, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 15 years, whether it's a shorter period of time. But for me, when I reflect upon it, I'm like, oh yeah, we tried for like 5-6 years. It was 2 years. But for me, reflecting on it, it feels like those 2 years, there were a lot of great, wonderful moments, but it felt so much longer, just in terms of like trudging through that. And so then reflecting back on that, you're right. Like, I was pregnant with twins with my daughter, and we lost baby B. And so anytime I see people talk about twins, not anytime, that's dramatic, but a lot of times I'm surprised at how triggered I am by that, of like, and we certainly weren't expecting to be expecting twins. That wasn't planned, I didn't, but we're surprised by it. But of course we started planning, and we were thinking about backup names, because we needed, what if it's a girl and a boy, then we're good. But if it's a girl and a girl, we don't know, and all of that. And how do we get a double stroller, but a triple stroller? Because we've got the 2.5-year-old. Well, he was not yet 2 at the time, but so all of those things that happen, and you're right, it's the smallest little thing that comes up, and that hypervigilance that you have. I know it's so funny to me, and I say funny, like not funny. It's not funny, but like when people are like, just relax and it'll happen, just stop trying, whatever. And it's like, I understand what you're trying to say. Like, tension is not a healthy and supportive environment to create life. Fair enough. But also, okay, tell me how, please. And of course, there are a lot of, meditative practices and yoga and mindfulness techniques and coping skills that we do talk about. but it still is, it's like a hypervigilance. You just walk around with infertility on your shoulder every single day. You have to constantly be thinking about it because, you know, a 28-day cycle is a very short time, and you know exactly where you are in that day, you know, on average 28 days. There's not that. And so I think carrying that energy with you for, in our case, 2 years, in some cases longer, in some cases shorter, it's not like, oh, I'm pregnant and this one looks like it's going to stick, and oh, this baby is physically here, like that. It's doing kind of that, processing that grief work and the trauma of carrying that on. And it's not, oh, the baby's here, everything's great. It's figuring that out. And I think that's when we talk about kind of the mental health aspect of it, right? Of what is it that you need to feel like you're being able to work through that and move past, because you are absolutely right. You know, the body keeps the score. Like you hang on to that. You know, one of the expressions, the issues are in the tissues, right? So what we've gone through, we physically carry with us. And how do we, yeah. So, I mean, I'm so curious, how have you been able to work through your infertility hangover? What are some things that have been helpful for you?
Yeah. So I should back up and say that, like, I'm still going through it. Like,
Yes,
it's 3.5
yes.
years later, and I've now had 2 babies, which, like, I'm so grateful for, of course.
Of course.
But those feelings are still there. Like, I was watching a Netflix show. Okay, I think it's called This Is Us.
Okay.
And one of the women went through infertility. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like, it's still there. And so, it sort of manifested for me, and, like, I'm getting really raw here. Like very scary thoughts in terms of, like, what if I lose one of them, or what if they get sick? Like, I think that infertility hangover is manifesting itself in these really, like, traumatizing thoughts that would kind of go replay themselves over and over and over again. Like, for me, it's like, it took me so long to get them. What happens if I lose one? I don't think I could take that. And so I've had, for a lot of the time, I spent pushing those thoughts away and, like, you are crazy, Michelle. Stop it. Like, stop the thoughts. Like, what is wrong with you? And a lot of, like, beating myself up about it. And I finally, my husband's like, you need to talk to somebody about this. And I agreed, and
Sure.
I have since. And for me, it's still a journey. Like, I'm not through it yet. And will you ever be? I don't know. From according to her, no, Michelle, you're never going to get rid of these thoughts for good. They're always going to be there. It's just how you manage them and how the life you give to them. And so, I've been working on personally doing some, like, compassion work, and, like, really trying to, like accept that feeling is there. It's there for a reason, but it's not real. And we can, accept it to the best of your ability, acknowledge it's there, and then I'm going to let it go. And, like, I'm not a therapist, and I'm certainly not an expert in this, but there is something to be said for, not beating myself up over something that I'm thinking about that isn't really my fault. And so working through sort of those thoughts. Also, in general, keeping stress levels down as much as possible, because I find if my stress goes up, then these thoughts kind of get triggered for whatever reason. And so I have a dog, so I try to walk him at least once a day, ideally twice a day. Really trying to find, like, alone time for me. We're in a sort of, here in Toronto, we're just coming out of another lockdown, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
So we haven't really been able to go a lot of places. So I've kept my kids home, which means it's been, like, work and kids at home, which is, intense.
Yes.
And so trying to find little bits of time that I can, remove myself from the home, just get some me time, get outside. And I find that physical activity for me is really key. And then the other piece is making sure my nutrition's on point. And, it is generally, but, during times of stress, like, I'm not perfect. Like, it doesn't always stay perfect. And so I find that when it goes, I sort of feel worse, and then sort of things get triggered. And so I'm just conscious of the different elements that kind of help keep me a little bit more in check. And I find then the hangover, symptoms aren't as bad.
Right. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And it's interesting. So my grandmother used to call it borrowing trouble. And so when we think about like, well, this could happen and that could happen, and what if this happens and what if that, and like we'll deal with what if when what if happens, certainly, but those intrusive thoughts are so present. And I know people who probably might be listening who have had no fertility issues are probably like, I do the same thing and I don't have an infertility hangover. It's like, that's also very fair, but you're right though, because there's that also added component of, it took me so long to get here. Like where I finally have my beautiful children, like, and I love also what you mentioned about the life that you give to ideas. And we talk about like in physics, right? Like what you put energy toward grows. And so if you put your energy into these thoughts and these negative ruminations where we are constantly thinking about what if. I remember when my son was born, I couldn't help be concerned that I was going to die and abandon him, and just then he wouldn't have a mother, and no one loves you like your mother. And it's like these wild and irrational thoughts. And even if I were to die, heaven forbid, there are other people who will love and take care of him too. But it's true. I mean, it was these really intense, we don't talk about postpartum anxiety a lot. We talk about postpartum depression more, thankfully. And that again, we're decreasing the stigma on that, and we're providing more education and getting more resources out there. But people often overlook the anxiety piece of the postpartum component. And it's hard when those intrusive thoughts come in. We talk about like cognitive behavior therapy, like your thoughts impact your mood, impact your actions. And it's figuring out those irrational, intrusive, automatic thoughts and how much energy you put into it. Like you said, the life that you give it. But when they're just so constant, it's sometimes hard to be as mindful as you'd like to be, and being able to say, oh, I'm being irrational right now, I need to stop that. Like yeah. And so, and then I loved the part that you were talking about, the non-judgmental piece of not only am I thinking these things and I'm ruminating on them, I'm now mad at myself because I had that automatic thought.
Yeah. 100%.
Yes. So we're really just digging ourselves into quite the little hole here in our little infertility hangover. But it gets that self-awareness piece is so key, right? You got to the space where you were recognizing your husband was able to be supportive and say like, I think this might be more than just something that you and I can just chat about and
yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. And I do have to acknowledge, because it's not just women who have postpartum who have, I think, the infertility hangover. You can have a hangover from losses. Like I ended up having a missed ectopic pregnancy where I almost lost my life. That to this day is still a trigger for me.
Sure.
And so there was not only was there the trauma of the ectopic pregnancy and the almost lose my life and the surgery, and then the loss of the fallopian tube and the loss of the baby, like there's loss there, or there's different places that women can experience this hangover effect. And I just want to make sure that those women don't feel like, oh, I don't get what you guys are saying because I don't have a baby yet. But like, you can experience this hangover like throughout the whole journey in different parts of your journey. And so unfortunately it's there. And I think, giving it a name probably is like a hangover and lightens the load a little bit, and gives you something to name it, and okay, this is what it is, and maybe now I can address it in some way, and hopefully for those people it can maybe take down that level of stress a little bit, which we know from the research, women who are going through fertility struggles are very high in stress and anxiety, and it's not good for the body and not good for hormones, not good for blood sugars, not good for all sorts of things fertility related. So
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that too. And it also, not just the birthing person, but the partners, I could probably talk, my mom probably could have some therapy sessions with her infertility hangover, watching me, her child, have these struggles, right? Both my parents have been very supportive and involved in all of my journey. And so for them, that has to be tough. And I hope not. I hope they're able to watch. I don't think they watch This Is Us, but if they were, I hope they would just be like, oh, this is a I hear it's actually a really sad show. I haven't seen it, which
It
is
is. I can't watch it anymore.
right. That's why I never started it, because literally the first spoiler. If you
Yeah.
haven't seen This Is Us, I think it's already over. It's like a decade ago, but I think isn't like the first episode where she loses a baby and then they adopt another baby because that woman, right? It's pregnancy loss. I don't need to get into details, but the first episode is pregnancy loss, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I know myself. First of all, I do this all day long, talking to people with their stressors, and I love what I do. And I also really enjoy comedy at night then, because dramas have never really been my thing, or action. But yeah, so bringing that back to what I was saying is like, I would hope that my parents would be able to just watch a show that happened to have some pregnancy loss and, oh, that's sad, and move on, and not be like, oh, I'm so sad for Meg. Remember all those years that, right? Yeah. And the same thing, my husband experiences it in his own way, and our friends and everybody. It's not just the birthing person, the person who is pregnant. It's the whole community that surrounds you. And I love what you were saying too about like, let's name it, let's claim it, let's make a plan, right? Like we've named it the Infertility Hangover. Let's add it to the DSM-5.
Yeah, I am all about planning. I am A-type, like firstborn. I want to plan, and so if I have like I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility. I was like, what? Like, yeah. I can't fix that. What do I do now? And I was pissed that I couldn't do anything specifically. Like I couldn't take this pill or do this surgery or whatever to fix the problem. So you're happy and you're sad at the same time. So yeah, I mean, like there's, it's, who knows?
Yes. And that is a very tough thing too with that unexplained, because mine was the same, where they were just like, no, everything looks fine. Everything's functioning. You're just not getting and staying pregnant. And it's like, you don't want a diagnosis, but sometimes when you have one, then there can be a plan. So it's kind of like the catch-22 there. But I like this because I hope that in this conversation that by naming it, we're going to claim it. We're going to be aware, like, these are the things that are causing me anxiety. I'm going to recognize more when these automatic thoughts come in. Oh, that's just my hangover talking. This is not necessarily based in reality. We'll deal with what if, when what if happens. Like you said, what's help taking a walk? Although Bless in Toronto, do y'all take him out on a walk every day when it's negative? Well, remember when I called you and it's like, you have 65 here. And you're like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a really cold month, I have to say. Yeah. It's been like quite chilly. For a long time.
Yes.
And yes, we bundled up and we go for walks.
I love good for you, man. That's amazing to hear, because sometimes I'm like, nope, it's too cold here in Kansas. Not going to do. But, I will not go into a tirade about how we need to get the United States on the metric system. I will save that for another day.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you so much for your time. What a great conversation. Again, our mission in life, just sharing awareness. You are not alone. You're not crazy.
No.
And there are people who are available to support and love and nurture what it is that you're going through. So I appreciate you using your voice with that as well today. Where can our team find you?
Yeah, so we're at mymindbodybaby.com, and on there you'll find different programs to walk you through different stages of the fertility journey. So whether it's IVF or IUI, or just getting started out, or if you have PCOS, need some support with egg quality, we've got evidence-based programs, lifestyle-based programs to help support your chances, increase your chance of pregnancy. Instagram, we're at mymindbodybaby page, and same with Facebook. And then if you are going through fertility challenges and you would like to join a private community, then you can look us up at Fertility Support Find Hope, and that is our private Facebook group.
Okay, wonderful. I'm writing it down. I've got it in the show notes. So everybody, once you've clicked on wherever it is that you're listening through or watching on YouTube, that'll all be in there. So you'll be able to find her. Please go give her a follow, like, rate, and subscribe.
Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much again for taking your time and sharing your intellectual and your emotional labor with our team here. I just appreciate you so much. And I finally figured out I figured out my little catchphrase and everything. So like Walt said, be curious, not judgmental. Have a great day, everyone.